Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Aspie Bridge. I am so excited. I know the last couple of days has been interesting because I haven't had a guest up until now. But you know what? Sometimes we save the best for when the timing is right. And let me tell you, this week I have a phenomenal guest with me, Rupina Meer, which is a functional health practitioner. And she and I are going to talk about this very, very essential self talk with the body and the body image and everything that goes on underneath the skin that we don't see, but we certainly feel it as autistic individuals. And sometimes we felt things long before we even knew it was part of autism and long before we even knew we were autistic. So a lot of the body functions knew they were working exactly the way they were meant to work based on the thoughts and the way we were talking to ourselves. And today we're going to be talking about how to improve the self-talk, how to not let a diagnosis bring us into the mud, how to get forward. And I'm going to tell you a story as we go on into our conversation to prove to you that it's possible. Now, before I started this podcast way back in January of 2024, I had a double chin. My face was blown out and everything. I don't look like that anymore. And even I've improved even more since. But let my guest, Rupina Meer, tell you a little bit about herself, and then we'll get into the content of our conversation. Welcome, Rupina. How are you today?
Thank you for having me, Suzanne. It's a pleasure being here.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in helping other women to feel more confident in their bodies and how their bodies work and going forward in life? Let us know a little bit about your quick story and how you got involved with helping others.
Absolutely. So I always say I didn't choose this path, it chose me. I was a young executive getting my MBA and climbing the rungs of the corporate ladder back in my 20s, fueling myself on caffeine and sugar, probably like many of your listeners, when I had three different health crises that kind of brought me to my knees. And my sister is a conventional medicine doctor, but I just couldn't get answers from anyone from the medical community. And so it was when I was down on my knees, desperately seeking those answers, that I turned to functional medicine and nutrition and quantum physics and epigenetics and psychoneuroimmunology to really understand this thing called the human body and the intersection of the science, soul, and spirit. And after having emerged from a 7-year breast cancer sentence, with what I call an impossible situation, I was walking around with a bleeding open tumor for 7 years.
Mm.
And so now that I've emerged on the other side, I am just lit up about the possibility of being that mirror of possibility for somebody else going through their impossible situation, knowing that nothing is truly impossible.
Oh, yeah. When we can model that it's not the end of the world when a diagnosis comes in and show people that our lives are keep going and keep getting better and better, I think it plays a large part in people saying, why not me too? Why
Yeah,
not me too?
absolutely. And the other thing I forgot to touch on is that while I was brewing disease, I looked the picture of health, right? All my labs were normal. So I hate that word normal because to me, normal is a recipe for mediocrity, right? Who wants to be normal, right? You want to
Mm.
be your authentic, unapologetic self. And so normal labs is catches the bell curve frequency of a diseased population. And so conventional lab ranges won't catch anything unless you're in full blown disease, right? Pathology, pathophysiology, pathomorphology. But if your body, let's say that, like you were saying, that listen to your body, we have the innate intelligence and the blueprint of healing within. And so let's say if your TSH went from 1.5 to 1.7, your body is going to be telling you something. It's going talking to you and telling you a little story. But then you go to your doctor and you're dismissed, you're medically gaslit, and you said, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with you. It's normal." And just usher you out the office and on your merry way. And so many women are in that space where they feel like their body is screaming at them, and yet they're placated and gaslit and told that,
Mm.
well, it's all good. Your labs are normal, or they're patronized and said, well, you're just getting older and you're just going to have to get used to feeling that way. And I'm like on a mission to say, no, absolutely
Mm.
not. There are so many other functional assessments that you can do that catch. There's a huge difference between clinically optimal and clinically normal, right? So in functional medicine,
Right.
we use optimal ranges, which look at function, like a healthy functioning body. And so we can catch disease so much years earlier before it starts brewing. And so that's really what I'm passionate about, is leveraging functional labs and seeing where the person has lost function, and then curating a protocol based on that so that they don't have to go through needless suffering.
Oh, yeah. And it's interesting that you bring up TSH because I am hypothyroid. And I've
Hmm.
been hypothyroid since I was born.
Oh,
And the
okay.
only signal that was shown there was the fact that I would sleep all the time. So they did end up getting me tested. But I
Hmm.
mean, hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism are some of the biggest things that have been completely pushed under the rug, forgotten, not seen as outside of concern. And yet women are losing energy, they're putting on weight faster, their hair is falling out. And the doctors
Absolutely.
are meanwhile saying, you're in the normal TSH
Normal.
level.
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't see what's wrong with that. And I'm even learning now that a lot of the thyroid is a buildup of lymphatic fluids. So I've
Hmm.
now taken to my own, without a doctor even telling me, to reduce the lymphatic liquids that are within me. And that's
Hmm.
another thing that's helped me lose weight, is just understanding. And I always knew way back when, I knew a doctor didn't tell me that I had all this weight gain, and I felt like I had weight gain.
Hmm. Well, the lymphatics, as you brought out, is sort of the garbage collection system of the body. It runs parallel to the immune system. And so if the lymph is congested, then you're going to hold on. Like you said, you had a lot of puffiness and fluid buildup and all of that. And so if you can just move that lymph and start decongesting it, people feel so much better. Yeah,
I can
absolutely.
attest
It's
to
huge.
that.
The other thing you mentioned, the TSH, well, that's the only look at that, right? But there's so many other markers. We look at free T3 and T4 and reverse T3. We look at TPO antibodies to see if the person has Hashimoto's, which almost 80% of subclinical hypothyroidism in the US is Hashimoto's. And so again, it goes unchecked for years while women are having these crazy symptoms. So
Yeah. Let's go back to the basics for a moment. And when I say that is, if someone gets up in the morning and they look at themselves in the mirror and they don't like the way they look, and it's like, ah, you're just so heavy. When are you gonna lose the weight? Come on now. You can look better than this. And that, what they don't realize is that looking in the mirror and putting themselves down is the number one way that they're gonna start accumulate more stress and more cortisol, and their body's going to say, okay, is that what you want? We'll give you that.
absolutely. I think you nailed it, because the fastest way to change your biology and your physical being is through sound. And by that, I mean the sound of your own voice. So, ladies, pay attention to that inner dialogue. Like, we often, a life has been entrusted to you. That life is your own. Please treat it with tenderness, because
Mm-hmm.
we forget that sometimes. And we say things to ourselves that we would never say to someone we love. You would never say that to a child or to a pet. Like, how lazy, what a failure, what a loser, you look terrible, your skin has lost its elasticity, or whatever else that you're saying to the mirror. Your cells are constantly eavesdropping on that conversation and then manifesting the desired reality. I don't know if you guys are aware of this Japanese scientist, Masaru Emoto, in his New York Times bestselling book, The Hidden Messages in Water. It
Yes,
was
I
a profound
am.
implication for what happened. They used high-speed photography to see what happens to the shape of frozen crystals in water. And some of the crystals were subjected to intense, concentrated thoughts of beauty and compassion and love and gratitude. And they formed these beautiful, brilliant, symmetrical snowflake patterns that could, like a
They were
brilliant, dazzling
amazingly
diamond,
beautiful. Yeah.
amazingly beautiful. And then the water crystals that were exposed to heavy metal music, or you fool, how stupid you are, and all of that formed these really asymmetrical, incoherent, distorted, dark patterns. I mean, it was. And so, guess what? The human body is over 70% water. And so the cells, that is the internal milieu, the internal landscape that your cells are bathing in and constantly soaking that up, just like a baby in the uterus, right? Is soaking up the whatever the mother is saying, her thoughts, her music, her feelings. It's catching, and the same thing with our cells. So I call it my embrace the elimination diet. And for those of your listeners, probably rolling their eyes and saying, oh, here she goes with the eliminate gluten and sugar and dairy and all of that. Nope, it's none of that. What I'm challenging you to embrace is eliminate resentment, guilt, blame, worry,
Hmm.
shame for a day, an hour, 10 minutes, or 10 seconds, whatever is available to you, and watch your health and hormones bloom. Because that, again, is the fastest way to change your being. And really treat yourself like someone you love, because like imagine this, imagine going to a shelter and adopting a dog, bringing it home, and then denying it fresh air or walks in the sunshine, feeding it toxic processed foods, forgiving it for nothing, berating it for everything. You would never do that to another
No.
sentient being, yet you do it to yourself. And so how would you change that inner landscape and dialogue if you treated yourself like someone you loved, like your child or a dog? How would you, like, let's say you are coming up against an impossible situation, you've gotten a horrible diagnosis or medical news, adverse news, or whatever, bankruptcy or whatever. I always tell my clients, ask the question, what would love do? What would
Hmm.
love do? And then go do that. Treat yourself. Like if your child had a boo boo or something, you're not going to rant at it and scream at it and say, how dare you? You're going to soothe it and you're going to treat it with love. So do the same to yourself. And that's what I mean by the elimination diet is eliminate that negative self talk, because it's the most powerful thing that changes your physical being.
Oh, yeah. I've seen the same scientist do it with rice and such, and he put a bottle of rice and he gave loving words to that. And sometimes a lot of my women are coming from trauma, and we need to start giving ourselves the words that we didn't receive. So, what he did
Exactly.
is he started talking lovingly to this rice, and this rice kept to stay white and fluffy and everything. And this is where the trauma comes in. And then in the second one, he did nothing. He didn't say good words. He didn't say bad words. He just
Mhm.
ignored it, which is what a lot of my people
That was the
experience,
control.
which is
Yes.
emotional neglect. And he
Yes.
did the negative words to the third one. Now, the rice with the positive stayed beautiful and fluffy. The one with the negative, with nothing, the neglected bottle, looked as bad as the one with the negative words spoken to it. So
Hmm.
there's a lot to be said to those of us who have come from a past of where we didn't receive anything or we receive the bad words, of course you're going to feel like you've come from a negative situation. But now is the time to start feeding yourself the love words that you need to receive. And when you see that, you're starting to love yourself. And I've come from that place too. I've told many of you stories of how I came from that. And I have to say that I've pretty much cured that situation for myself, and I feel really good. So I know it works. And if
Yeah,
you don't mind, I'm going to go into the story I was going to tell.
please.
Part of my experience was that my mother challenged me before my daughter's wedding, a month before my daughter's wedding, to lose 10 pounds. Now she's thinking in her mind, cut out food. If we
Hmm.
cut out food and all the sugars and all the ice creams and all of that, then we'll lose the weight. Now I got smart and I said, well, my weight isn't from that. My weight is from being around an environment that was not healthy, that was not positive. It was based on ridicule and criticism. And when I pulled myself away from that environment, I started to see that my weight got better and better. Because the same thing about saying nice words to yourself is now the way of pulling yourself away from an environment that's not going to give you a healthy body.
Yes, absolutely. I want to unpack that a little more. I call that the hidden tax of fawning. Are you familiar with the term fawning?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe your listeners aren't, because maybe many of your listeners are familiar with the terms fight, flight, freeze, right? So when you're in chronic
Exactly. That's where
survival
they've heard
mode, which we
it.
call sympathetic dominance, there's two branches of the autonomic nervous system. There's the sympathetic and then there's the parasympathetic side, right? So the parasympathetic was dubbed the rest and digest system by a Harvard physician who coined that term. And so all healing, all weight loss, your optimal hormones and metabolism and all of that happens in the parasympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. But if you're caught in that survival mode, fight, flight, freeze, which many people know, but fawn is the state where you're constantly swallowing your truth to keep the peace for others, when you're shrinking yourself down to make others feel comfortable, or when you're masking your own authentic neurological response to appear normal. The
Yes.
nervous system feels betrayed by that. It literally perceives that as an external threat. And so each time you're doing that, each time you're shrinking and people pleasing and scanning the room and hyper vigilant, the nervous system sounds an alarm. And that alarm, when it goes on for 10, 20, 30 years, that keeps your cortisol, which is your main stress hormone, elevated. And so cortisol hijacks all your other fountain of youth and your fat burning, muscle building hormones, right? It literally steals your thyroid hormone and all your other progesterone and estrogen because it will monomaniacally make more of itself at the expense of all these other hormones. So nothing can happen till the body feels safe.
Mm-hmm.
Once you can signal safety to the body, right? And that could be like you were saying, like, for the wedding, you lost weight not by eliminating certain foods, but by eliminating that environment and by changing the internal terrain. I've had many, many clients who were stuck with their weight loss or plateaued. And I'm like, instead of being so hyper vigilant and counting your macros and being so regimented, I just asked them to take a break from that. Many of them went on vacation and they're like, Rupina, you won't believe it. I was actually eating more like calorie rich food and stuff that I normally won't eat. And guess what? Ended up losing weight. Well, why is that? Because the body shifted automatically into that parasympathetic mode of the autonomic nervous
Mm-hmm.
system, right? It felt safe. They were smiling more. They were leaning into life. They were laughing. They were enjoying. And so the body realized that, well, there is no threat, there is no war. So I can release the weight. It's safe to release the weight. It's safe to balance their hormones. It's safe to do all of this. And so that is truly, I say that the nervous system holds the master key for healing,
Yes.
for weight loss, for all of that, because you cannot outrun, outperform a dysregulated nervous system, right? As long as sometimes it's so unconscious, the person doesn't even know it. Excuse me, I'll just turn that off for 1 second.
Yes.
Sorry about that. So it's so unconscious that the body, even though the person feels safe, because a lot of my clients say, but I don't feel like I'm under threat, Rupina. This happened to me. The trauma happened to me 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I'm now in a good place. I now feel safe. I said, yeah, you as a conscious person knows that you are safe. You are no longer in that trauma, in that crisis. But the nervous system is trained, especially the amygdala, which is the primitive part of the nervous system. It's trained to constantly survey the Serengeti and say, what am I going to kill and what's going to kill me? So it is
Right.
constantly just looking for threats and surveilling the area. And once it's been locked down in that mode, it could be at an unconscious level, right? Because you've lived like that for 10, 20, 30 years. That's what the nervous system memorized, that survival state. And so now you're no longer in trauma. You are safe, but the nervous system hasn't gotten the memo.
No,
And so
true.
till you learn how to self-regulate your nervous system, that is one of the biggest things that I do the work with my clients. Obviously, as a functional practitioner, I work on the diet and rest and supplements and all of that is essential. But till you learn to self-regulate the nervous system and the body feels safe, it's not going to work on healing. It's not going to work on hormones, on immune function, on weight loss, on reducing inflammation. It's just not going to do that because it is wired to stay, to keep you alive. Meaning all the
Oh,
blood
it
will go
is.
to your brain or to your legs so you can fight or flee or freeze or fawn, which is that fourth stage that psychologists call fawning, is, like I said, you're keeping the peace but swallowing the truth.
Oh, yes. And I did that for many years. It wasn't until recent, with a lot of help from my organization, that I came to realize sometimes we have to move our entire environments in order to get to that point where we're no longer fawning and people pleasing. It's sort of like almost an emotional replacement of family. You're never going to get rid of your family unless you completely stop connecting with them, but you can find a replacement where it's a healthier atmosphere and go in and you can have the same effects of getting your nervous system back down. I was telling Rupina earlier that I work with Mary Morrissey, and sometimes just a good
Mhm.
hug from someone is enough to
Yeah,
it
that
brought my
butterfly
nervous
hug.
system right
Yes.
down. And I laughed like, okay, I can use another hug now. And sometimes we need to do that. If we're in the
Mhm.
middle of fight or flight, just give yourself a hug because that
Mhm.
whole feeling of feeling held is something that will help the nervous system come back down to a state. It helps to think of someone you really care about, a child or a favorite aunt or someone that really gives the best hugs while you're hugging yourself, and that is going to be very helpful. Rabina, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the doctor visit.
Mhm.
Because I can tell you there are a lot of my women, and some men are part of this, but a lot of my women have been pushed out of the society job. They're no longer making a lot of money. And then they go to a point where they go to the doctor for an annual and they're put back into the stress zone again
Mhm.
because if something's going well, thank you, 5 minutes later, $500 later,
Yeah.
they're pushed out the door. And it's like
Mhm.
now they're back in stress again because they're paying for a bill which they
Mhm.
couldn't afford because they're no longer working as much. But the doctor hasn't changed the pricing. So
Mhm.
sometimes I think our problem as an autistic society is one,
Hmm.
we're underemployed. We don't have the adequate doctor and medical insurance. We go to
Hmm.
the doctor because everybody says, go get your well visit. We walk
Hmm.
in, they walk in for 5 minutes. How are you doing? I'm doing well. Thank you very much. Have a great day. And then the bill comes and we're right back in the
Yes,
cycle again. What can you
right.
speak on that?
Wow, that is so prevalent. It's so ubiquitous, like I said. I mean, that myth of normal. And unfortunately, it's not about blaming or shaming anyone, right? It's like doctors, they took the Hippocratic Oath and they want to do the best, but it's just that we're run by, it's called a healthcare system, but it's really a disease care system, right? And so
Right.
they literally have like 5 to 7 minutes to spend per patient. And that just doesn't give them the time to get into your biology and your psychology and your environment and all the other things that it would really, when I do my initial intake with a patient or a client, it takes minimum 90 minutes because I do a very detailed intake. I ask them about their food and their stressors and their environment and their working conditions and all of that. And unfortunately, in conventional medicine, they just don't. It's McMedicine, right? What I call
Mhm.
it's McMedicine. It's assembly line, in and out, in and out, and then on top of that, as you said, when the people are go in, and then if they don't have insurance, then they're stuck with a bill that the visit didn't help them, and there's no other solution. I mean, I guess really I would say is that start educating yourself or work with a coach or, study the parts that if you feel like you said you had subclinical hypothyroid, always listen to those whispers of wisdom from within. Educate yourself and then get the help, get the support you need. Don't just let somebody say that, oh, your labs are normal or you're fine and you're sent off on your merry way. It's a very, very dangerous assumption because that happened to me, like I said, many times. And I was the picture of health, and yet I was brewing disease, right? So it's like now what I know, like for instance, with breast cancer, there are things that you can run something called the Dutch test, the dried urine test for complete hormones. That looks at the metabolites of estrogen. Estrogen has been so vilified, right? And so
Right.
many women have been told estrogen doesn't cause breast cancer, but there are certain pathways depending on if you're going into the 16 hydroxy or the 4 hydroxy pathway, which we can tell on this Dutch test that those could be problematic, right? And so we look at your detox and we look at how you're metabolizing and eliminating those hormones. So there's so many different things that come into play. And what I do is I look upstream, right? So even if somebody's coming in with neurological conditions, we don't just look at that area. Like we don't, if you're coming in with gut, now obviously the gut is the elephant in the room, right? Like if somebody comes in with Crohn's or IBD or whatnot. Obviously, we realize that their gut is in danger. But I also look upstream, and the acronym I use is called HIDDEN because it's hidden, right? So we look at hormones, we look at immune, digestion, detoxification, energy production, nervous system, and oxidative stress. I look upstream at all of those different systems and I see where function has been lost, not where disease is
Oh,
brewing, but
right.
where
Yeah.
function has been lost. And so, and by how much? How much has function been lost? And so then I don't just treat the data and the numbers, then I do a very thorough, comprehensive intake. And like I said, listen to the person because you're not just your data, you're not just your labs, you're not just your numbers. You are a person with a history and trauma and whatever else, and your goals, like what brought you. And then I put all of that together to custom curate the protocol. So I think the biggest thing is that people walk away feeling seen and heard, right? Because normally they just aren't given that opportunity in the conventional medical system because the 5 minutes you feel unseen, unheard, and dismissed. I felt that many times. There were many times when I would ask, I had my laundry list of questions, being a very diligent, you know, I was in the corporate world at the time. I didn't know anything about healing and nutrition and functional medicine. And so I would have my laundry and they would literally be out the door. There was, one handle is on the door and they're like, all right, Miss Meer, you're good. And I'm like, all right.
No. Yeah, and that, as I say, just getting back to it is, I mean, I don't suggest women who are having any kind of distress avoid their doctor. But
Yeah,
do the
absolutely.
self research first. Maybe
Yes.
you can solve the problem by a couple of different activities you can do for yourself and asking yourself questions. Is my energy as high as it used to be? Is there anything
Exactly.
in my environment that might be stressing me out? Is there something that's causing my gut to overreact? And
Yes.
it's not based on food because a lot
Right.
of times the nervous system can affect the gut, and that's why it's going
Absolutely.
crazy.
Yeah.
Sometimes your thyroid may affect your energy, and therefore you need to take. There are a lot of times, we're not suggesting to stop going to the doctor, but there
No.
are a lot of times that you can sometimes solve your own medical situation better than a doctor can because you know yourself.
Absolutely. And that's what I think that in our system, we need advocates, right? Because I call myself a metabolic detective because I'm looking under the hood. Most people do come to me after they've been to many people and they're like, well, they couldn't solve the problem. Yet I'm feeling brain fog. I can't lose this extra 20 pounds. I can't perform as an executive like I used to perform. There's something wrong with me. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with you per se. You're not broken. It's just that this is the tax. I call it the hidden tax of masking, of fawning. This is every time you've been in that hypervigilance, the alarm that's supposed to gently swing back and forth, it gets stuck in that
Yes.
hypervigilant alarm mode. And the nervous system can never power down. If the nervous system can never power down, that's going to impact not just your weight, but your cognitive performance. I have so many executives come to me and they're like, I speak for a living and I've forgotten the words. I don't remember the words. And some of that is due to perimenopause and menopause because we lose the protective effects of estrogen. And so that does impact memory, but a lot of it is because of a dysregulated immune system that has just been run on survival mode for so long and it can no longer compensate. And
Right.
so they have to do it's not sexy because everybody comes in and they're like, give me the supplement. Like, how can I raise my energy and how can I sleep better? And I wish there was a pill that you could pop and say, guess what? Take this, and this is going to regulate your nervous system. There isn't one. You've
No.
got to do the work. You've got to ritualize certain practices. I call them sacred bookends, right? So you
Hmm.
start and end the day 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening with intentional practices, whatever floats your boat. It could be 10 minutes of prayer or breath work, meditation, vagal toning, which is humming. There's so many options, and whatever, like I said, appeals to you, but do that, ritualize that so that it's almost part of your DNA. It's like there was this one meditation teacher, he had this acronym RPM, like rise, P, meditate, right? Everybody wakes up, P's, and then he used to meditate. So he's like, he had conditioned himself to the point that even if there is a death in the family, no matter what mayhem and madness and chaos is going out in the world, he's going to meditate. It's sort
Right.
of like taking a shower. It's like even if you're going to a funeral or you have something to deal with, you're still going to cleanse and shower your body, right? So, how about cleansing your mind? So, if you can cleanse your mind and set the intention to serve, but not get stuck in a tidal wave of reactivity and doing, then you can have a little bit more control over your day and how you show up. And that's going to impact your physiology and your biology. And same thing at
Absolutely.
night. So
Yeah.
those sacred bookends, I call them, that start and end your day with something that gives you that biological anchor to know. And then also, like you said, Suzanne, if something is off and the doctor is telling you you're fine, don't ignore it. Don't ignore it. There are plenty of functional practitioners, integrative. Seek somebody out and get the help you deserve.
Right. At one point, I was so upset with one of my doctors that I fired her. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid to fire your doctor. If they're not giving you what you need to be positive or they're not validating your experience, which is what I had, if someone invalidates the experience you're having or tells you that you're not something, even though you know you are, don't be afraid to fire them. Doctors are not any different than anyone else. If they're not meeting your needs, find someone else. And in this case, maybe it would be smarter to find someone like Rupina who can dive deeper, who has the ability to dive deeper. And oftentimes that's a coach more than it's a therapist or it's a doctor because they have been trained to look deeper under the surface to find the why, not the cause. And what I mean
Mhm.
by that is they'll ask you the emotional, the environmental,
Mhm.
not the physiological, because often it's the mind, the parasympathetic, which is what Rupina was saying. It's often the mind and the emotions that are causing some of the problems. So if we can get to that point, we can solve some of the other bodily issues that you're feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say it's kind of akin to throwing a pebble in a pond, right? And there's all these ripples, right? And so instead of chasing after the ripples, we're actually finding where is the pebble landed, right? That's creating all the ripples, right? And those ripples, like I said, are your hormones and immune and digestion, detoxification, energy production, nervous system. So we look outside the box into other areas. That's why kind of like a metabolic detective, right? Like say another analogy I like to give is like if there's a crime that happened in the living room, you're not just the detective is not just, I mean, if it's a good detective, he's not just going to look in the living room area. He's going to go to the basement. He's going to go to the bedroom, the kitchen, and gather clues from everywhere that point to the crime scene, but not necessarily in that area, right? So that's very myopic and reductionistic thinking to say, okay, well, if you've got neurological symptoms, go to your neurologist. If you've got joint problems, go to a rheumatologist. If you've got digestion, go to a gastroenterologist. But the body is this exquisite sum of the body, mind, and spirit, and the environment, and the epigenetics, and all of that that is playing in this exquisite harmony. So being very myopic and reductionistic doesn't really serve us.
No, it doesn't. And what I really liked about what you were talking about a few minutes ago was the fact of how to put new strategies into your day in the morning and in the night. I go to sleep with an abundance meditation. Other people get up
Yes.
in the morning with a dance. I often
Mhm.
get up in the morning for me and think about the dream that I'm going to, well, not going to, but wanting to be a part of. You don't get to a dream. You put yourself inside of the dream, inside of the activity that you really wish to do, and sometimes when you're able to put yourself into an experience you love to have, pretty soon your body relaxes. And some of those aches and pains are no longer there because you've switched from the uh what is it, the sympathetic to the parasympathetic. Yes.
Sympathetic to parasitic. Yes, and speaking to that, when the body can distinguish between something that you've actually experienced in the 3D life and something that you've just mentally rehearsed and imagined over and over so well, you brought all your five senses in it, you felt what it's like to be in that place. What does it smell like? What does it taste like? What does it look like? Your body actually develops new neural circuits. It's formed neural connections. So the brain cannot distinguish between something that you has actually happened and something that you've mentally rehearsed to the point that in the brain it feels that it's happened. And then you
Yes.
draw the event to you, right? then it'll come find you. You don't have to hustle or chase after that dream home or the vacation or the man or the woman or whatever it is, because now you've done that heavy lifting, that inner size, right? I call it exercise. There's inner size, and it's about rich. It doesn't have to be very complicated and long, right?
No.
But if you can set aside 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night, you know, especially like you were saying, before bed is what they call the money time, right? Because your brain wave slowly shifts into alpha, which is a slower brain wave, right? Right before we drift away. And so if you can practically hypnotize yourself into the reality that you do want, right? And that is kind of like, you know, the conscious mind is only,
Hmm.
you're only working with 5%. It's like the iceberg theory, like the iceberg that's sticking out of the water is the 5% that you're working with, the conscious mind. The 95% is submerged under the water. So if nobody addresses those subconscious behaviors and patterns and thoughts and belief systems that is continuing to dictate your biology and your physiology, and then people say, well, this isn't working. That isn't working. I'm like, well, you've just been very superficial, right? You've only been working with that and you are doing it consciously. You're doing it. Whatever you're focusing on abundance, you're focusing on wholeness. You're working on that piece, 5%, but you're ignoring the 95% of the submerged iceberg under the water. So till you can again do certain things to regulate the nervous system, signal safety, create new neural circuits, then you're running on all cylinders. And that's what I mean when I say the nervous system holds the master key that turns the lock for sustainable
Absolutely.
healing, right? Because that's when you're firing on all cylinders and you're like, all right, it's sticking. Like the weight, like I'm sure the weight loss, let me tell you, ask you this, Suzanne, when you had that weight loss for the wedding, and it wasn't due to eliminating foods, but it was through, you know, being aware of your environment and your inner landscape. What happened? Did the weight stay off?
Yeah, I did. It's still off
Yeah.
because
And
I'm
I didn't know that. Trust me, I didn't know anything about her story. So I just knew that that has to be the case because that is what creates sustainable healing versus somebody. And I've worked with people, I've worked with athletes, I've worked with, they're like, give me the macros and give me the this, give me the supplements, and I'll dial it in. And they keep sheets and spreadsheets. And I'm like, but this is great. And you're doing well, but you're so hyper vigilant and focused on that that you're actually, your body is going into that threat and survival mode. So it will not release the weight. It will not put on the muscle. It will not do what exactly that you asked it to do because all this hypervigilance is creating a threat environment.
exactly. I was just going to say it's a dependency, much like dependency on other people.
And
It's still a
exactly,
dependency, and your body doesn't have a chance to do what it's supposed to do on its own. If you're
exactly.
so, you may be thinking you're so focused on all the right things to do, but you're not giving your body a chance to do what it needs to do. And like your answer, your question to me was, I went from being in despair, like my dream will never happen because I'm in this environment and this is happening, to the hope that I have the vision I want to see come into my life because I'm taking the steps, and each day I put conscious thought into that vision is every day that I'm keeping the weight and the negative and the despair out of my diet. So if you can replace the vision and the life you want with the despair of what's not happening, you're going to change your system right there.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we always have the choice, and we know that we can be the creator of our lives or the victim of our lives, right? And it's like if you play, not to, you know, say it in a bad, because victim has a negative mentality, but some people feel so indoctrinated or so identified by their diagnoses, right? I always, reframing again, words are so
Mhm.
important, right? Abracadabra literally means as we speak, we create. So
Right.
when people say, I have this terminal illness, I always correct them, or I have this terminal cancer, they leave. I'm like, let's reframe it that there is cancer. but you don't have it. You don't have the identity of cancer. You don't have the identity of autism or autoimmunity or Hashimoto's or whatever it is that you're dealing with. Because when you can keep that little bit of space between the diagnosis, but that's not who you are, that again is a signaling for the nervous system doesn't go into that high alert threat mode.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so let's just recap for a moment because that's exactly what it comes down to. Is just understanding that it's what we say to ourselves. It's how we allow ourselves to stay in a stuck mode. It's how we hyper focus on the negative and victimhood and the problems that are going to keep us exactly where we are day after day. But when we can repattern our thoughts, when we can repattern what we say to ourselves, when we can repattern to something outside of ourselves to focus on, then you're going to start to see the changes in your body because you're no longer deep survival. I got to do this. I got to do this.
Absolutely. And it all starts with self-awareness, right? Just being the witness. If you can be the witness and just say, oh, this is interesting that this happened, and I'm reacting, I'm feeling this way. I think another big thing is that, with spiritual bypassing, people feel like they have to be happy all the time and satisfied and elated. But if something negative happens, it's okay for you to feel that disappointment, to feel that whatever it is you're feeling, resentment, betrayal, whatever, feel it, because the only way out of that is to feel. You've got to feel it to heal it, right? If you
Right.
are just numbing yourself to the feeling and say, oh no, I've got to be Pollyanna, I've got to be happy and excited, and then again, the body doesn't feel safe because there is something brewing underneath. It's a negative emotion. You don't want to deal with it. You want to go downstairs and pour yourself a glass of wine or a chocolate cake or numb yourself out with watching TV or shopping or whatever it is. Then that emotion is just going to continue. And emotion is just energy in motion. So it's just energy. It just wants to be held like a child. A child when it's wailing and crying. Nobody wants to go and pick up a crying child because, I mean, the noise is deafening. But if you ignore it, what happens?
It gets
Escalates,
bigger.
right?
Yeah.
It'll get louder and louder and louder till you go and pick up that child and coo it and rock it and hold it and acknowledge it. That's all that emotion is asking of you in that moment. It's just asking to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged. And once you do that, it dissipates. So I think
Yes.
that needs to be said too, because there is often this sort of spiritual bypassing in certain spiritual groups and whatnot, where people feel like, oh, this happened, but I have to put on a happy face.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want to live in the negative emotion. You want to feel it so you can move through
Move
it and
through it.
emerge
Yes.
on the you don't have to live there rent free forever. Like some people, well, why are you in a bad mood? Or why did this happen? Why is this person so bitter? Well, this happened to them 5 years ago. Okay, well, that was 5 years ago, but now there's still every time that you talk about the trauma and you bring it up, again, the body can't distinguish between something that happened 5 years ago and that
Mhm.
you're narrating the story. You're so stuck and identified with the story, and say you're telling your mother, your best friend again, oh my gosh, this happened to me, and that the body thinks is back in the trauma, right?
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
So so it's like we have to be so mindful of the stories and the narratives, because if you continue to tell that story, then that's going to continue to perpetuate in your life.
Exactly. That is a great way to finish up because you know what? I think what we need to get people to understand is have your emotions. Yeah, you don't want to block them out. You don't want to numb them out with any substance because they're still going to be there. They're still going to do that. So it's just ignoring your emotions is as bad as saying negative things to yourself. But if you can
Exactly.
accept it, radical acceptance has become a big
Hmm.
part of my life. Radical acceptance of saying, okay, this happened. I get
Hmm.
it. I understand why it happened. But now I'm
Hmm.
not going to stay here. I'm going to go over the bridge and I'm going to get to the other side of this because
Exactly.
that's where my life belongs, not here in victimhood.
Right. Absolutely. The bridge is that gap between where you are to where you want to be. There's always that bridge of possibility.
Absolutely. So, Rupina, I want to say thank you. I am so glad that we waited for this awesome conversation. I'm glad that you had a chance to come on the Aspie Bridge. I know your information is going to help a lot of women to stop blaming themselves for their weight. And that's a big thing right there. Stop blaming yourself for the weight. Repattern your thoughts. Go in the direction of starting your day and ending your day on a positive note so you can get good sleep because the good sleep is going to take you to the next day where you can continue with those positive habits. Is there anything
Absolutely.
else you'd like to add for our
Just
final message?
Yeah, so just one final thing. I think a lot of people feel that healing is about coming to that perfect destination, right? But healing is about embracing all of it, the broken, the shameful, the damaged parts. Every version of you deserves to be held with love and tenderness. And I think that is true healing, right? When you can accept and embrace all of it. And I'm happy if your listeners, if anybody, if this resonated and you guys would like to dive deeper, we'll put the link in the show notes, but you can, come in for a free consultation. I work with women all across the globe, and we can dive deeper into your unique biology and metabolism and see how to up level it and support it better.
Absolutely. You all know that I have the Aspie Bridge Facebook group page and I have Rupina's picture there. And if you want to go into that spot and say, I would love a consultation, if you go to the Aspie Bridge Facebook group page, hit subscribe so we can keep you up to date with all of the other guests. But if you have a specific question for Rupina or any of my other guests, I would love you to subscribe there. And of course, subscribe to the Aspie Bridge podcast so you can see more awesome conversations with people with great information for you. I want to say thank you for this week. And next week, we're going to be starting with neurodivergent entrepreneurs that can help you if you find that you don't have a career or you don't have a job that is filling your heart with positivity. We're going to help you learn how to have a business so you can go forward in your life. But for now, I want to say thank you to Rupina for coming today. And thank you
Thank you
to
for
everybody
having
for
me.
listening. Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure and honor to serve your listeners.
Oh, thank you. It's important information. Let me tell you, very important information. And I want to say thank you to everybody for coming today. Don't forget to subscribe to both of those pages, the YouTube channel and the Facebook group page, so we can keep more of these videos, podcasts coming to you. Thank you.